The ground trembled, and the spirit soldier nation, formed by countless spirit soldiers, began to stir. Streams of light rushed out from deep within, hastily flying without a moment's pause. However, the spirit soldiers did not attempt to stop these individuals from breaking through. They trembled in place, sensing an overwhelming pressure, one that felt like the might of a king, rapidly spreading from the depths. This pressure paralyzed them, making them unable to move. Boom! As the pressure spread, a massive figure, hundreds of feet tall, emerged from the depths, its steps shaking the earth. Cracks and jagged rifts spread out across the land beneath its feet. Roar! The giant, glowing with blinding light, let out a roar. A violent wave of spiritual energy shattered the unfortunate spirit soldiers in its path, but it paid them no heed. Its focus remained locked on a lone figure in the distance, relentlessly pursuing it. Damn it! Seeing the Spirit King ignore everyone else and chase only him, Mu Chen's expression changed. Why is that giant after us? Wang Tong and the others noticed the situation as well, their anxiety growing. With the Spirit King's strength now skyrocketing, not even the combined efforts of Zhao Qingshan and Su Huang would be enough to defeat it. It's coming for me. Mu Chen gritted his teeth and said, I'll lead it away. You all head to safety. That's too dangerous. Wang Tong and Ran both exclaimed urgently. If we keep running, it will catch up to us sooner or later. Mu Chen shook his head, his black eyes showing no sign of panic. He took a deep breath and said, We split up. I'll go with you. Luo Li bit her red lip, her voice firm. The Spirit King was immensely powerful, and it would be troublesome for Mu Chen to handle it alone, so she had to follow. Mu Chen hesitated for a moment before nodding. He wasn't one to be reckless. Although the Spirit King hadn't fully passed the weak birth stage, its power was unquestionable, and handling it alone would indeed be difficult. Without saying more, he moved. The sound of a dragon's roar echoed as he activated the dragon soaring art, his body transforming into a dragon-shaped shadow, darting away at lightning speed. Luo Li, seeing this, moved swiftly, keeping up with him at almost the same pace. Roar! As Mu Chen changed direction, the Spirit King immediately noticed. With another roar, it charged straight toward Mu Chen again. Light flashes ahead, the giant behind, the earth trembling beneath them. In no time, they disappeared into the distance. Let's go. Wang Tong watched Mu Chen and Luo Li's retreating figures, gritting his teeth. He immediately turned, leading Ran and the others out of the Spirit Soldier Nation. Staying by Mu Chen's side would serve no purpose now. It would only drag him down. The others understood this too. Although they were worried, they quickly followed Wang Tong. As the Spirit King pursued Mu Chen, those still fleeing in other directions began to notice the scene. Gradually, they halted, looking with uncertain eyes toward the direction of the chase. What's going on? Why is the Spirit King only after Mu Chen? Zhao Qingshan frowned, puzzled. Mu Chen was the only one underground earlier. He must have obtained something that made the Spirit King chase him. Mu Fengyang gritted his teeth, eyes burning with fury. He had planned to draw the Spirit King's attention elsewhere, but he never expected that not only did he fail to drive Mu Chen out of the hunting ground, but Mu Chen had also discovered the underground secret. Although they didn't know exactly what Mu Chen did down there, whatever he gained must be extraordinary. Does that mean I gave Mu Chen the opportunity to obtain the treasure? Just thinking about it made Mu Fengyang's face turn pale with anger. What should we do? Mu Fengyang looked at Zhao Qingshan. They had lost more than 10 people, yet gained nothing. How could he accept that? Zhao Qingshan's eyes flickered. He too was unwilling to leave empty-handed. After a moment of thought, he gritted his teeth and said, Wait and see. Then, follow behind and look for an opportunity. If it presents itself, we'll act. Otherwise, we'll retreat quickly. He was decisive, fully aware that the Spirit King's power was too great for them to confront directly. They could only wait for a chance. Mu Fengyang nodded, his gaze shifting in that direction. If Mu Chen ended up taking all the benefits this time, he might just cough up blood in frustration. Elsewhere in the sky, Su Huan also came to a stop, his eyes flickering as he locked onto the same direction. Amidst the towering mountains, The sharp sound of air being torn apart echoed urgently. Two streaks of light shot past without the slightest hesitation, racing into the distance. Shortly after, the ground trembled violently, mountains crumbling as a massive figure, hundreds of feet tall, charged forward. Dazzling spirit light radiated from its body, making it resemble a blazing sun that was impossible to look at directly. It roared in fury, unleashing waves of spirit light that shattered mountain peaks, then frantically pursued the two fleeing figures ahead. Despite its colossal size, its speed was like a raging thunderbolt. Even Mu Chen, who had activated the dragon soar art, was gradually being caught. It's too fast, and its spiritual energy is endless. If we keep running, we'll exhaust ourselves first, Luo Li said, her clear eyes darkening as she glanced at the rapidly approaching Spirit King. Mu Chen's expression was grim. He knew Luo Li was right. The Spirit King had locked onto him and wouldn't stop until it reclaimed the Spirit Crystal Shard in his possession. But if it succeeded and fully completed its birth stage, not even a true heaven-reaching stage powerhouse could stop it. If it then decided to kill him anyway, the outcome would be nothing short of disastrous. His eyes flickered. The best solution now was to kill the Spirit King outright. It was undeniably powerful, but that didn't mean he was completely out of options. This was originally meant for He Yao, but since you refused to back down, I'll start with you instead. Mu Chen was decisive. His black eyes flashed with cold intent as he turned to Luo Li. Can you hold that beast off for a while? Luo Li nodded lightly, her delicate jade hand tightening around the Luo god sword. A chilling aura seemed to flow along the sheath. Mu Chen smiled. He wasn't particularly worried about Luo Li. Her true abilities remained an enigma even to him. More importantly, she wielded the Luo god sword, a genuine divine artifact. Though currently sealed, the mere fact that it was a divine artifact made it synonymous with overwhelming power. In his entire life, Mu Chen had never seen a divine artifact up close. Even supreme beings would be tempted by such a treasure. Having reached an understanding, the two figures shot forward again, landing atop a distant mountain peak. The moment Mu Chen touched the ground, he immediately sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and swiftly formed hand seals. Spiritual energy surged, and spirit seals began materializing in rapid succession. Is he setting up a spirit array? Luo Li's eyes locked onto Mu Chen. From the looks of it, he was preparing to use a spirit array in battle. But with how powerful the Spirit King was, even a fourth-grade spiritual array might not be enough to deal a fatal blow, unless it was a fifth-grade spiritual array. Mu Chen was already a fourth-rank spirit array master, so setting up a fourth-grade spiritual array wouldn't be difficult. However, even with his mastery of the heart array state, arranging a fifth-grade spiritual array wouldn't be easy. The higher the grade of a spirit array, the more complex it became. At a certain level, even the heart array state would provide only minimal assistance. After all, in the eyes of true master level or even grandmaster level spiritual array masters, the heart array state was merely an entry-level technique. Luo Li shifted her gaze to Mu Chen's handsome face before letting out a soft chuckle. If anyone had absolute confidence in Mu Chen, it was her. That confidence had been built through a year of companionship on the spiritual road. In that merciless place, this young man had never once given up. He had faced setbacks and failures, but in the end, he had endured and grown stronger. Even the proud Luo Li secretly admired that resilience. If not for Ji Xian's schemes back on the spiritual road, Mu Chen, who was always calm and rational, would never have lost control and resorted to such slaughter, ultimately leading to his expulsion. Ji Xian. Luo Li's slender fingers tightened as a cold glint surfaced in her eyes. With his talent, even in the Sacred Spirit Academy, he would undoubtedly be one of the most outstanding individuals. It seemed that one day, Mu Chen would have to face him again. And when that time came, it would be a true battle. As Luo Li's mind wavered slightly, a distant roar erupted once more. The ground trembled, and the entire mountain range quaked violently. From afar, a blinding radiance, akin to a blazing sun, surged toward them. Luo Li glanced at the approaching Spirit King, then at Mu Chen, who remained seated with his eyes closed, preparing the spiritual array. Her delicate fingers tightened around the long sword in her grip. With a light step, her lithe figure shot into the air, appearing mid-sky. "You should stop now." Her clear eyes reflected the massive silhouette before her. Her voice, cold and resolute, resonated through the heavens, carrying an edge of sword chi that gradually condensed in the air. The Spirit King lacked intelligence and naturally could not understand her words. It simply roared at the tiny figure standing in its way. With an earth-shaking bellow, its colossal palm, shrouded in a torrential burst of spiritual light, came crashing down toward Luo Li. A hint of frost flickered across Luo Li's delicate face. Her clear gaze turned even more piercing. In the next instant, she stepped forward, and with a flick of her slender wrist, the black long sword in her grip unsheathed in a flash. Clang! A crisp, ringing sound echoed through the sky, reverberating across the heavens. A brilliant, azure sword chi erupted skyward like a pillar of light, seemingly capable of rending the heavens and splitting the earth. Boom! The sword chi clashed ferociously against the incoming giant palm. A deafening clang of metal resounded as the impact sent shockwaves outward. From afar, Zhao Qingshan, Su Huang, and the others, who had been cautiously following along, gaped in astonishment. They watched in disbelief as the Spirit King was forcefully knocked back, crashing into a distant mountain, which shattered upon impact. A collective gasp escaped them. Their gazes flickered with shock as they turned to look ahead. There, a young woman clad in dark robes hovered midair. Her long sword trembled slightly, sending out faint ripples of energy that spread outward in slow waves. That sight left everyone utterly stunned. Boom! The massive Spirit King staggered back, its immense footfall causing the entire land and mountain range to tremble violently. However, it quickly steadied itself. A flicker of rage seemed to ignite within it, and the radiance emanating from its colossal form grew even more intense, enveloping the entire mountain range in its glow. Roar! With a furious howl, it clenched its massive fist. Torrents of spiritual energy gathered, forming a raging tempest. In the next instant, it thrust its palm forward, unleashing a colossal spiritual energy beam, nearly 100 meters wide, that tore through the sky, hurtling straight toward the slender figure ahead. The Spirit King did not wield any spiritual techniques, yet its sheer spiritual energy was so vast that even a heaven-reaching stage powerhouse would struggle to match it. With such overwhelming power at its command, every strike carried the force to incinerate mountains and boil seas. The spiritual energy beam ripped through the sky, leaving a massive fissure in the land below. The peaks along its path crumbled into dust under the terrifying pressure. Zhao Qingshan, Su Huang, Mu Fengyang, and the others, who had just arrived, felt their hearts tighten. The Spirit King's strength had clearly soared beyond what they had witnessed before. No wonder no one had ever dared to challenge a Spirit King. Once fully matured, these beings were truly terrifying. Luo Li's fingers tightened around her sword hilt. She took a slow breath, her delicate chest rising and falling slightly. Her clear eyes turned icy cold. Tracing a fingertip along the sword's blade, she left behind a thin trail of crimson, staining the weapon's surface. Buzz! The long sword absorbed the crimson hue in an instant, emitting a faint hum. A subtle yet mesmerizing change occurred. The sharp blade now shimmered with rippling patterns, resembling gentle waves. It was as if the sword itself had transformed into a flowing river, exuding an aura of profound mystery. Luo Shen's sword art, sword into Luo River. The Luo god's sword trembled slightly in Luo Li's grasp. As she flicked its tip, intricate, elusive sword patterns bloomed in the air. Boundless spiritual energy surged from her body like a tidal wave. Then, with a decisive motion, she slashed downward. Swoosh! At her command, an azure sword radiance erupted forth, transforming into a vast river of sword light that spanned hundreds of meters. The river roared and coiled in the sky like a mighty azure dragon. Though it shimmered with the serene beauty of flowing water, the aura it exuded carried an edge of bone-chilling lethality. The moment the sword river took form, It surged forward with unstoppable momentum, colliding head-on with the incoming spiritual energy beam. Boom! A deafening explosion shook the heavens. Ferocious spiritual energy and razor-sharp sword chi erupted outward, tearing the mountain range apart and leaving the land in ruins. Luo Li's slender figure trembled slightly as she was pushed back by the impact. She took 2 steps back in midair, but her grip on the long sword remained firm. The Spirit King let out an enraged roar, and both of its attacks were blocked by the insignificant figure in front of it. This made it even more furious, and it tried to crush the figure before it into dust. In its rage, it took a step that shook the earth, its assault wild and violent, sweeping across like a torrential downpour. Facing its attack, the young girl held her long sword firmly, not giving an inch. Sword chi surged into the sky, blocking its attack. Far in the distance, Zhao Qingshan and the others stood frozen, watching this scene, their backs suddenly feeling cold. Although Luo Li's offensive was just a defense, the fact that she could keep up with the Spirit King's onslaught up to this point was nothing short of impressive. None of them would have been able to do this, and they hadn't expected that the girl who had always quietly followed Mu Chun would be so astonishing not only in her appearance and temperament, but also in her strength. Impressive, Su Huang couldn't help but sigh lightly, his gaze complicated. Behind him, Su Qingqing gritted her silver teeth, staring enviously and despondently at the girl in the distance, who seemed even more outstanding under the pressure of the Spirit King's assault. Compared to her, Su Qingqing felt utterly ashamed. However, to block the Spirit King by herself is too difficult. Her defense is gradually shrinking, and it won't be long before it fails, Su Huang observed, his eyes narrowing as he gazed at the distant mountaintop where a figure was sitting cross-legged. Was it Mu Chen? What was he preparing? Could it be that the two of them really planned to directly defeat the Spirit King? But could that even be possible? Although Mu Chen was extraordinary, he was still only at the quasi-spirit transformation stage. Su Huang focused on the figure in the distance, his brow furrowing. While Luo Li was blocking the Spirit King's steps, Mu Chen had completely shut out the outside distractions. His mind was focused as spiritual seals continuously formed around him. However, as the number of seals reached about 150, the process began to slow down. In terms of the number of spiritual seals, a 4th-rank Spirit Array Master could typically form between 100 to 200 seals. Once surpassing 200, they would qualify to approach the level of a 5th-rank Spirit Array Master. Of course, being able to form a sufficient number of seals doesn't guarantee success in setting up a Spirit Array. A Spirit Array is an extremely complex thing, and the seals are only the foundation. The real skill lies in how to perfectly link these seals to release their full potential, something only a skilled Spirit Array Master could achieve. Master-level Spirit Array Masters could casually lay down an array requiring thousands of seals. The complexity of such a task would be so high that even a supreme-level expert without a talent for Spirit Arrays and years of experience would struggle to set one up. However, Mu Chen was far from a master-level figure in the realm of Spirit Array Masters. He was still just beginning, and right now, he needed to figure out how to resolve the situation in front of him. With 150 seals, it was clear he wouldn't be able to set up the Spirit Array he needed just yet. He took a deep breath, his mind calming as he immersed himself completely in the Heart Array state. Mu Chen had reached a high level of mastery in this state. In his estimation, his current Heart Array state should be considered an advanced one. Once entering this state, he could feel the external world as though it were reflected in his mind, allowing him to control things with near-perfect precision in an absolute state of calmness. However, with the increase in his power and the higher level of arrays he was attempting to set up, the advantages of this state were gradually weakening. Mu Chen knew that once someone reached the 3rd-rank Spirit Array Master level, they would have a chance to comprehend the Heart Array state. In the eyes of Master-level Spirit Array Masters, this state might only be considered a lower-level one. But even though the Heart Array state might not be very advanced, it was a foundation. Only those who mastered the Heart Array state thoroughly would be able to comprehend even deeper states. His mind stirred slightly, and the spiritual seal that had originally formed quietly disintegrated, dispersing into the air. However, before the spiritual energy could dissipate, with just a single thought, the scattered energy began to condense once more. This time, it appeared even more solid, with an excess of energy slowly seeping out. Around Mu Qian, one after another, the previously formed spiritual seals started to dissolve. Yet, as they dissipated, new seals immediately took shape again. Formation, dissolution, formation, dissolution. It was as if a perfect cycle had been established. But within this cycle, no spiritual energy was wasted. Instead, the number of original spiritual seals was silently increasing. The same amount of spiritual energy, yet the formed seals had undergone a drastic transformation. Mu Qian's mind was as calm as still water, fully immersed in this endless cycle of dissolution and condensation. Time seemed to pass unnoticed until a ripple suddenly spread across the tranquil depths of his consciousness, as though a single drop of water had fallen into a silent lake. Deep within his soul, something seemed to tremble slightly. In that unseen realm, it was as if an ethereal eye slowly blinked open amidst the ripples. And at the very moment that intangible eye opened, the entire world unfolded within Mu Qian's mind. He saw ahead Luo Li's battle with the Spirit King. He saw in the distance Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, and the others secretly observing. He saw even farther, rolling green hills, flowing rivers, and the boundless spiritual energy permeating the heavens and earth. That invisible eye gazed upon the world, and everything seemed infinitely profound and mysterious. So this is the heart eye? A whisper echoed in Mu Qian's heart. As the ripples gradually faded, his black eyes suddenly snapped open, appearing unfathomably deep. He knew this state was only a brief moment of enlightenment. He couldn't maintain it for long. He had to seize this fleeting opportunity. With a sudden movement of his hands, countless spiritual seals around him shattered simultaneously. As waves of spiritual energy rippled outward, new seals instantly formed in their place. In just a few breaths, brilliance surged around Mu Qian. The number of spiritual seals soared beyond 200 in an instant. A deep intensity flickered in his gaze. With a sweep of his sleeve, the hundreds of spiritual seals shot into the sky. The air trembled as they merged with the heavens, causing the spiritual energy of the entire world to grow restless. Everyone could clearly see a colossal light array beginning to take shape above Mu Qian. Then, a spiritual hurricane swept across the land. Streams of spiritual energy, visible to the naked eye, surged like a mighty river, endlessly pouring into the enormous light array. Is that a spirit array? From afar, Su Huang and Zhao Qingshan stared at the colossal formation with wide eyes, their hearts shaking with disbelief. An array of this magnitude had to be at least a fifth-grade spiritual array. Could it be that Mu Qian was now capable of arranging such a high-level spirit array? Impossible. The massive light array continued forming in the sky, countless beams of spiritual energy intertwining and weaving together, gradually sketching out an immensely complex and intricate formation diagram. Rumble. The spiritual energy within this entire realm grew wild and turbulent, surging like radiant waves and continuously pouring into the spirit array. Ahead, the Spirit King, who had been relentlessly pressuring Luo Li with its ferocious attacks, suddenly turned its gaze toward the colossal array in the sky. That formation was condensing purely from the surrounding spiritual energy, making it extremely sensitive to power fluctuations. From it, the Spirit King could sense a tremendous force brewing, a force that made it feel uneasy. Roar. With a furious bellow, it grabbed a massive boulder, hundreds of meters wide, and enveloped it in spiritual energy before hurling it fiercely toward the still-forming light array, attempting to destroy it. Swish. But before the boulder could even get close, a vast, azure sword chi streaked through the air, slicing it cleanly in half. The massive rock shattered into countless fragments, scattering across the land. The Spirit King roared in fury and swung its giant palm again, unleashing a terrifying surge of spiritual energy without hesitation. It showed no mercy as it launched a ferocious attack at the girl who had been obstructing its path. Under its frenzied assault, the sword light surrounding Luo Li rapidly shrank, clearly showing signs of being completely overwhelmed. The delicate hand gripping her long sword trembled, fresh blood seeping from her fingertips. Trying to block the terrifying assault of the Spirit King alone was no easy feat, even though she wielded the Luo God Sword. A divine artifact, it remained in a sealed state. Nevertheless, she would not retreat, for behind her stood Mu Chen. Right now, he could not afford to be disturbed. Roar! The Spirit King let out a furious bellow, its attacks growing increasingly frenzied. The sword light enveloping Luo Li flickered unsteadily, on the verge of collapse. In the sky behind them, the light array grew even brighter. As the formation diagram neared completion, a spiritual array gradually took shape, an enormous black lotus. Is that the demonic lotus slaughter array? Su Huang and the others, recognizing the formation, frowned. They had seen Mu Chen use it before in his battle against Li Xianhong. It was powerful, but at best, it was only a fourth-rank spirit array. How could it possess such an overwhelming presence now? If it were merely a fourth-rank spirit array, using it against the Spirit King would be a foolish move. Something's off. Su Huang's eyes suddenly sharpened. Next to the forming black lotus light array, more radiant lines were being drawn. Another massive black lotus. The spiritual array now had 2 black lotuses. It seemed like a minor addition, yet the transformation was staggering. Though Su Huang was not a spiritual array master, he could sense that this version of the array was far beyond the previous demonic lotus slaughter array. So, the one he used before wasn't complete. Su Huang pondered. He knew Mu Chen could not have created such an advanced array himself. His abilities were not at that level. That left only one possibility. The version of the array Mu Chen had previously used was incomplete. In the sky, the 2 black lotuses slowly rotated, dimming the heavens as fierce winds howled. Mu Chen gazed at the fully formed demonic lotus slaughter array and exhaled deeply. With his growing mastery of spiritual arrays, his comprehension of the formation had deepened as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to attempt such an advancement. Based on his understanding, the complete form of the demonic lotus slaughter array consisted of 4 parts. If fully manifested, 4 black lotuses should appear. At that stage, its power would likely rival that of a 7th-grade spirit array, terrifying beyond measure. Even a sovereign of the heaven-reaching stage would be reduced to ashes within it. But Mu Chen was far from that level. Even forming a 2nd black lotus was only possible because he had momentarily touched upon the heart-eye state. As for summoning all 4, that would require much more time. Luo Li. Mu Chen's eyes, reflecting the twin black lotuses, shifted to the raging Spirit King. A cold glint flashed in his gaze as he spoke softly. Luo Li gave a small nod, her delicate figure retreating gracefully to Mu Chen's side. She remained vigilant, gripping her long sword tightly as she fixed her gaze on the Spirit King. Roar! With its obstacle removed, the Spirit King's glowing eyes locked onto Mu Chen. Without hesitation, it took a thundering step forward. The ground trembled as it launched itself skyward like a blazing meteor, hurtling toward Mu Chen with immense force. Boom! The sheer impact sent cracks through the mountain beneath Mu Chen and his companions, sinking the surrounding terrain. Mu Chen's expression remained impassive as his hands swiftly formed a seal. High above, the 2 massive black lotuses suddenly aligned, their cores surging with an intense concentration of energy before unleashing it all at once. Boom! 2 colossal beams of spiritual energy collided. Rather than repelling each other, they merged at astonishing speed. Within mere moments, the blinding radiance dissipated, along with the massive spiritual array itself. At the heart of the dispersing energy, a single luminous lotus, only about 10 feet in size, emerged. Though small, it radiated an unfathomable power. Its petals pulsed rhythmically, like a beating heart, exuding an eerie aura. Mu Chen gazed at the eerie lotus, then flicked his finger. Whoosh! The lotus shot forward, trailing a streak of light, rushing straight toward the descending meteor-like Spirit King. Both moved at incredible speed. However, just as the collision was about to occur, Mu Chen's lips curled into a cold smile, and his hand suddenly clenched. Boom! The meteor-like light formed by the Spirit King suddenly trembled violently. Within the Spirit King's body, a dark flame seemed to surge up. The dark flame was not very intense. However, inside the Spirit King's body, which was filled with spiritual energy, it caused quite a stir. As the dark flame flickered, it continuously burned away much of the surrounding spiritual energy. This dark flame was something Mu Chun had secretly injected into the spirit crystal earlier. When the Spirit King swallowed the spirit crystal, it also absorbed this dark flame. Although the Spirit King's immense spiritual energy prevented the flame from causing it any harm, sometimes battles are determined by small details. As expected, the dark flame was soon engulfed by the nearly endless spiritual energy, but the brilliant light emanating from the Spirit King's body dimmed slightly in that brief moment. And it was at that moment when the eerie light lotus shot straight into the Spirit King's chest. Bang! A resounding explosion echoed through the sky, and the shockwave of spiritual energy swept across the land. It felt as though a spiritual energy hurricane had struck, lifting countless boulders into the air before grinding them to dust. The Spirit King's massive body flew back through the horrified gazes of onlookers, crashing heavily to the ground. The entire mountain range trembled as several peaks were flattened, and the Spirit King's enormous form collapsed within them. Su Huang, Zhao Qingshan, Mu Fengyang, and the others immediately turned their gazes towards the scene. Having been hit directly by such a powerful spirit array, even the Spirit King could not possibly ignore such damage, right? Under their watchful eyes, the mountain range trembled again. Amid the swirling dust, a gigantic figure staggered to its feet. He's still alive. A shiver ran through their hearts, and they couldn't help but feel a bit of relief. Mu Chan stood on the peak, his gaze fixed on the massive figure rising from the dust. His handsome face showed no signs of fluctuation. He simply observed quietly. As the dust slowly cleared, the Spirit King reappeared. However, this time it was far from its previous imposing form. There was now a gaping hole the size of several meters in its chest. Cracks spread from the hole, almost covering half of its body. One crack even extended from the chest up to the dazzling crystal on its forehead. Su Huang and the others saw the scene as well, and their mouths involuntarily twitched. Mu Fengyang's eyes flashed with a hint of fear. Who would have thought that Mu Chun could inflict such damage on the Spirit King? Boom! The Spirit King howled to the sky. It could sense the severe injuries to its body and the rapid loss of spiritual energy. Although it lacked the sensation of pain, the depletion of its spiritual energy made it feel nothing but fury. The earth trembled as it suddenly charged forward, its target clearly Mu Chun. Mu Chun frowned as he watched the enraged Spirit King rushing toward him. Though the Spirit King had been severely wounded, even a weakened tiger still retains some of its ferocity. No matter what, this Spirit King was comparable to a heavenly stage powerhouse. If it hadn't been for the dark flame Mu Chun had buried within the Spirit King's body, causing a stir, he might not have been able to injure it so badly. He clenched his palm. Spiritual energy burning with the dark flame surged out from his body. However, a cool jade-like hand grasped his. Luo Li smiled faintly and, in a soft voice, said, "Let me finish this." She could see that Mu Chun was quite exhausted. Although the Spirit King was gravely injured, its counterattack before death would be terrifying, and she was better suited to finish it off. Mu Chun was momentarily stunned, then nodded with a smile. Luo Li stepped forward gracefully, holding the Luo God's sword firmly in her hand. She raised it and pointed it toward the rushing Spirit King. A sharp, murderous aura emanated from her eyes as she gathered her power. Mu Chun could feel the surrounding spiritual energy rapidly dispersing. It was because the sword chi emanating from Luo Li's blade was overwhelming the area. That sword chi made even him feel a twinge of fear. His gaze fixed on Luo Li's delicate face, like fine porcelain, and his expression grew increasingly solemn. The sword chi rippled through the world like water waves. It wasn't an exceptionally sharp blade aura, but it gave off a heart-stopping sensation, as if anyone who stepped into it would be quietly sliced to pieces with the slightest movement. Mu Chen stared in surprise at the girl before him. Luo Li's strength was somewhat beyond his expectations. But then he gave a self-mocking smile. Luo Li's talent was no weaker than his own, and she was even more dedicated in her cultivation. If he didn't have the advantage of being a spirit array master, he honestly wouldn't dare claim that he could defeat Luo Li in a direct confrontation. Luo Li's gaze fixed firmly on the charging Spirit King, and then her eyes slowly closed. With that, her long sword was suddenly swung down with great force. Buzz! As the sword descended, the ground in front of her cracked open instantly. Sword chi surged wildly, gathering toward the sword blade. In just a few breaths, it had all converged onto the blade. Swish! Waves rippled from the sword's edge, transforming the long sword into something like flowing water. A brilliant blue light shot out with overwhelming speed, faster than the naked eye could follow. All that could be seen was a streak of light cutting across the sky, followed by a deafening sonic boom. The air was cleaved in two, and between the split, the sword chi caused the air to separate and remain divided, unable to heal. The temperature in the world seemed to drop for a moment. Mu Chen's eyes widened, and his pores tightened in response to the extreme danger. It was an involuntary reaction to facing a deadly threat. Luo Li's strike wasn't particularly flashy, but the terrifying power hidden within the calmness was enough to send chills down anyone's spine. Mu Chen looked up. The beam of blue light, condensed to perfection by the sword chi, had cleaved into the Spirit King's body and passed through it. In the distance, one peak after another split apart, with the breakage smooth as a mirror. The mountains within a range of 1,000 feet quietly cracked open. Boom! The massive Spirit King continued charging toward Mu Chen and the others, seemingly unharmed by the strike. Luo Li's face turned pale, and her delicate body swayed slightly, only to be caught by a pair of arms that reached from behind, supporting her waist. She turned her head and gave Mu Chen a faint smile. Mu Chen pulled her right hand toward him and noticed the bloodstains. He gently wiped it clean with a look of concern and helplessly said, "Why push yourself so hard? I can handle it." Luo Li smiled, saying nothing. Her eyes filled with softness as she looked at Mu Chen, who was filled with concern. It seemed neither of them paid attention to the charging Spirit King. In the blink of an eye, the Spirit King had closed in. Just as it was about to collide with the mountain they were standing on, its enormous body suddenly split apart, cleanly into two halves, crashing to the sides and flattening the surrounding peaks. Amid the swirling dust, the tremors of the earth slowly ceased. Mu Chen's gaze was indifferent as he watched the Spirit King's body break apart. Its massive form quickly crystallized and shrank, transforming in mere moments into two radiant orbs of light, like the blazing sun, illuminating the world. Terrifying spiritual energy emanated from them, and it was faintly visible that the two separated spirit crystals, the very ones the Spirit King had consumed earlier, now seemed even deeper in color and even more terrifying in their spiritual power. This was the Spirit King's residual spiritual light, though referring to it as spirit crystals now seemed more fitting. Far in the distance, Zhao Qingshan and the others, drawn by the brilliant light, snapped back to attention. They stared at the glowing orbs with a greedy gleam in their eyes. This was the spiritual light of a Spirit King. If they could obtain it, the spirit light baptism would be nothing short of perfect. They could even use it to break through to the heaven-reaching stage. Zhao Qingshan and Mu Fengyang's eyes reddened, and their throats tightened. They exchanged a glance, clenched their teeth, and with a sudden burst, shot forward. At this moment, their reason seemed to diminish, and though Mu Chen and Luo Li were powerful, after the previous fierce battle, they were clearly weakened. Su Huang's gaze wavered slightly as he stared at the blinding light. However, he merely sighed softly and made no move to act. He coldly glanced at Zhao Qingshan and Mu Fengyang. He had interacted with Mu Chen before and knew how difficult it was to deal with him. Thus, Su Huang did not think it was wise for these two to try and snatch things from him. Although Mu Chen and Luo Li might indeed be heavily exhausted at the moment, given Mu Chen's nature, Su Huang would never believe it if they had no backup plan. Far off, Mu Chen held Luo Li, his black eyes cold. He watched the two figures charging toward him and curled his lips into a mocking smile. Luo Li also noticed their movements, and a cold look appeared on her face. "Are you finally done watching the show?" Mu Chen gave a faint smile as he said to the two approaching figures. Zhao Qingshan and Mu Fengyang's gazes flickered. They were slightly reluctant to meet Mu Chen's eyes, clearly still feeling the immense pressure from the heavy blow Mu Chen had dealt to the Spirit King earlier. They no longer dared to underestimate him as they had before. "Go for the spiritual light, split up," Zhao Qingshan called in a low voice, then darted toward the spiritual light on the left, while Mu Fengyang immediately headed toward the right. Mu Chen's expression remained cold as he watched them. He clenched his hand, and a rusted metal iron ball appeared in his grasp. With a snap of his fingers, the ball shot out, instantly bursting into thousands of rays of light. A massive spirit formation immediately took shape and extended, surrounding the locations of the two groups of spiritual light. He had already noticed these guys lurking in the distance. How could he possibly go all out with the Spirit King and leave them unguarded? Hiss. Zhao Qingshan and Mu Fengyang hastily regained their balance as they stared in shock at the spirit formation surrounding them. The pressure it exerted was no weaker than the one Mu Chen had unleashed earlier. If they insisted on charging in, they would likely be immediately trapped by the formation. The level of this formation was something they lacked the confidence to break through. "This bastard!" Mu Fengyang gritted his teeth. He hadn't expected Mu Chen to still hold back at this point. "Retreat." Zhao Qingshan gritted his teeth and decisively turned around to flee. With Mu Chen prepared, they didn't stand a chance. Mu Fengyang, however, hesitated for a moment before turning around, wanting to leave. "Now that you've come, don't even think about leaving." Just as Mu Fengyang turned, Mu Chen's mocking voice reached his ears. He looked back and was horrified to see the massive light formation seemingly closing in on him. Fear gripped him, and all fighting spirit vanished. He immediately sped up. "Humph!" Mu Chen coldly snorted, and his figure moved. The sound of a dragon's roar echoed as he vanished. When he reappeared, it was like a ghost, right behind Mu Fengyang. "Get out of here!" Suddenly, lightning erupted from Mu Chen's body. His skin turned a faint silver, resembling metal. He clenched his fist and punched out. Boom! Violent spiritual energy surged, and the white tiger appeared, as if merging with Mu Chen's punch. It mercilessly collided with the unprepared Mu Fengyang. The tremendous spiritual energy from behind horrified Mu Fengyang. His face turned pale, and he didn't even have time to turn around. He hastily activated a set of spiritual armor to shield himself. Clang! Mu Chen's fist slammed into the armor with a resounding crash. Sparks flew, and Mu Fengyang spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, crashing to the ground and creating a massive crater. Mu Fengyang lay in the pit, his spiritual armor cracking with visible fractures. The armor had already been severely damaged by the Spirit King during an earlier attempt to frame Mu Chen. Now, after receiving Mu Chen's brutal attack, it had reached its limit. Mu Fengyang coughed up several mouthfuls of blood, his breath weak, his eyes filled with fear. He hadn't expected Mu Chen to be so ruthless and act without hesitation. Cleaning you up with a spirit formation orb is too much of a waste. Mu Chen sneered, raising his hand as the rusty metal iron ball dropped back into his palm. Mu Chen descended slightly, and with a flick of his hand, a massive boulder the size of a small mountain was drawn toward him. He hurled it directly at the heavily injured Mu Fengyang. Amid Mu Fengyang's terrified scream, the massive rock crashed down, causing the earth to tremble. Then, a beam of light descended from the sky, piercing through the boulder and directly teleporting the heavily injured and unconscious Mu Fengyang away. As Mu Chen dealt with Mu Fengyang, Zhao Qingshan had already fled far away. Mu Chen only cast a glance and then withdrew his gaze, his eyes cold. However, he had no intention of pursuing. He was indeed quite exhausted, and to force Zhao Qingshan out of the spirit light realm, he would probably need to use the spirit formation orb. But clearly, Mu Chen was unwilling to do so. He stood mid-air, his icy gaze fixed on the distance, where a few figures were still watching from afar. However, as soon as they met Mu Chen's eyes, They all shuddered and instinctively stepped back. Su Huang looked at the young man standing in the air with an imposing presence and sighed. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Behind him, Su Qingqing and the others remained silent. She clenched her silver teeth, staring at the young figure. Her heart was full of mixed emotions. Who would have thought that even her most respected older brother now dared not challenge this person's sharpness? But she had to admit, Mu Chun was indeed far stronger than he had been just a few months ago.